Okay. Can you hear me okay? Is it coming through? Yeah, good. Okay. So thanks a lot, Doug. Very nice to be here. It's great to be back at MadFest 2025. I think this is my 5th MadFest, so I feel like not only a Unilever veteran, but also a MadFest veteran. And MadFest has done a great job of taking a contemporary angle on marketing in the digital age. But I think most of us who are marketeers have really understood over the last sort of 18 months or so that something has happened in the world of social media. There's a kind of toxicity happening. There's a lot of negativity happening around social media. And it kind of was brought to a head with the Netflix dramatization of adolescence, which I think a lot of people saw, which really showed us that the divide between the way young boys are receiving social media and the way young girls are receiving social media and the implications of that is starting to fracture. And there's something happening there, which as marketeers and brand owners, we need to understand how to navigate that. So in order to discuss that kind of thorny topic, I'm delighted to be joined on stage with Caroline Gregory, who works for Unilever as the brand director globally for Axe. And also Kian Bakhtiari, who runs an agency called The People and is, I would say, an expert in Gen Z. So in order to start the discussion, I'm going to turn to you, Kian, to ask the question, what do Gen Z consumers really value in a brand today? Are they still driven by purpose and ethics, or has something shifted in the way that they perceive the world?
Yeah, Ian, I think that's a good question. And when you share that question to me of what does Gen Z value, I think the first thing I thought about was, so we run a global network of Gen Z creators from all around the world. And if I'm honest, I would say 99.9% of the time, they're actually not thinking about brands. So it's like...
Shame on them.
Yeah. So the starting point is actually, for them, brands occupy such a tiny space in their everyday life. And the provocation from that is, how can brands be relevant in young people's world? And to do that, you have to understand what's happening in young people's world. The last week I was at Climate Action Week, and what was really clear was that increasingly young people are less hopeful about the future. And if we think about, you don't need to know the reasons why. There's so much happening in the world, whether it's war, whether it's climate crisis, whether it's just finances. And because of that, young people don't feel, I think more importantly, they don't feel like they can actively contribute to their own futures. So I think the opportunity there for brands is, how do you invite young people to participate in their own futures? Because if we look at the world of business, for example, the average age of a board of directors is 60, and that's great. They've got a lot of experience. But 50% of the world's population is under 30. So we need that representation. And
I told you not to make me feel old, Kian.
Not at all. You're part of the youth group. And same with politics. I think only 3% of parliamentarians are under 30, so they're not able to shape their own future. The other part I would say is adulting. So just being an adult is increasingly hard. If you don't mind, Ian, I'm going to do a quick poll. How many of you would agree that being an adult is hard work? Okay, so that's quite a lot. And a recent survey shows that for Gen Z, they feel that becoming an adult starts when you're 28. And that's because the traditional markers of adulthood, which is like getting married, having children, having a stable job, kind of leaving the home, is increasingly either unattainable or not aspirational. So I think there's also an opportunity for brands to help support young people with becoming adults.
So I'm just going to push you a little bit, Kian, because, clearly we've got Unilever on the stage with us. I'm ex-Unilever, which is a company which has kind of defined itself on being a purposeful marketeer, doing the right thing, ethical business. And I guess the sharp question is, have young consumers changed in their view of brands that are ethical and purposeful?
Yeah, I appreciate the provocation. I think for me, it's one thing we always say is Gen Z isn't one thing. So if you think about it, 32% of the world's population is Gen Z, and that differs across different cultures. But I think where...
I'm not sure 32% of this audience is Gen Z.
But I think where it's really important to be ethical, actually, and where we see in our community, Ian, is when it comes to choosing where you want to work. Increasingly, we're seeing young people in our community, they want to work for a company and a brand that is doing positive in the world. They don't want to be contributing to the world's problems. So I think looking at it as much from a business lens as a brand lens.
Yeah. Okay, thanks, Kian. Let me turn to you now, Caroline. So, Caroline, Lynx has been part of youth culture for a long time. How would you say the brand has evolved? I said Lynx. I should have said Axe, right? Shouldn't I? Should I say Lynx or Axe?
Well, it's Lynx here in the UK.
Oh, the UK. We're in the UK. Yeah, okay. To stay relevant and responsible to today's Gen Z landscape.
Yeah, so I think, thanks Ian for the question. I think rightly as you say, Axe or Lynx has always been a rite of passage for young people growing up. And it's very much been a part of culture. Like, it shapes culture, it's in TV shows, it's, you know, like, it's made fun of a lot of, also in social. We're always, you know, talking with our consumers and understanding what's happening. But I think one of the things we did most recently, which was probably one of my favorite pieces of research, was an ethnographic research across the globe, where we looked at what's the role of fragrance in attraction for young people today with both boys and girls. And we learned basically two big shifts. One was that attraction for young people is no longer physical. It's not about the quantity and going out on the hunt. It's about a quality of connection. But the other is that self-doubt still holds young guys back, just as it always did. But what's different is that young guys, because they're so paralyzed by that fear, actually what they do is make no effort. And young girls are saying just a little bit of effort would be really, really appreciated. And fragrance can play that role for young people. So for us with that, we basically took that work. We worked with our agencies to simplify the brand fundamentals. But one of the things that I'm sure you all see the work of the brand was that we were missing humor, which is at the core of Axe. And when Kian talks about the fact that young kids don't care about brands. Quite frankly, they don't give a shit about advertising or brand content. I have an 8-year-old who skips his thumb, couldn't skip fast enough. And so humor was a really important way for us that we needed to refine it. So with that simplified brand fundamentals, we got to a new idea of fragrance can change it all, which is the most over-the-top, absurd way of showing that fragrance has a little bit of effort. And I think we'll play you something a little bit later. But that's been really key to us to get the relevance, but also do it in a way that, you know, is modern and reflects the way the guys and girls view the world today.
Cool, great. I think that, you know, humour has played a role in advertising, especially here in the UK, since the beginning of the world of advertising. But it still is relevant today. I think that humour is a human trait that people understand. And, you know, it doesn't matter whether you're Gen Z or Baby Boomer or Gen X. Humour is important. I think the trick is to make sure it's relevant to the people that you're targeting. So coming back to you, Kian, I'm interested to know, how do Gen Z navigate the duality of social media? It is a place of social connection, but it's also a place where, anxiety and things are spreading through kind of comparison and stuff like that. I mean, obviously, that generation are what we would call digital natives, so they've grown up with social media. But how, in your experience and from what you've learned from what you do, how are they navigating that and dealing with that?
I would say it is a duality, like the two can be true at the same time. Like social media, the internet can be the best of places and the internet is undefeated, but at the same time, it can cause a lot of strain for young people. And I think it's important to remember almost how social media has changed, because social media used to be the place of hope and possibility. Like 2010s, there was that promise that social media was going to democratize everything and kind of give voice to the voiceless. And you had kind of the Arab Spring and kind of new voices. And I think actually part of that is true. You're seeing voices that have historically not been included. You're seeing the emergence of creators. But the challenge is, I would argue, that social media is increasingly not social, in the sense that you're not seeing your friends, you're not seeing your family. You are increasingly in these digital silos where the algorithm's feeding you content. And the challenge with that is it's so attractive and it knows you so well, you end up spending more time in the virtual world and less time in the physical world. There's a lot of research that shows Gen Z is the loneliest generation in recorded history, more lonely than 60-plus-year-olds. And I think it's easy to look at that and say that's their problem, but it's actually the architecture of how social media works. And it's not, I would kind of caveat this, Ian, by saying it's not all doom and gloom. Actually, there is great opportunity. And what we're seeing in our community, and a lot of young people are actively seeking in real life experiences. They're actively seeking community, whether it's going to run clubs instead of dating apps, whether it's like sober raves instead of doom scrolling. And I actually think one of the biggest opportunities for brands is how do you bring young people together again in real life? And digital can play a role in that. It's not to say you need to ban like phones and social media. It's to say, how can you also make the physical world attractive again?
Yeah, I think the thing that stuck out for me from what you just said is that Gen Z is possibly the loneliest generation. There's something very sort of sad, it feels sad that we say that in an era of social media. So Caroline, so coming back to Lynx, I mean, you've said it's fundamentally an entertainment brand that leverages humour. And tell us a little bit how you think humour and pop culture can help Gen Z boys navigate identity and attraction without falling into the harmful stereotypes that we hear about.
Yeah, so I think as the world's #1 male grooming brand, we if I don't get showered with water.
That wasn't part of the script.
As the #1 male grooming brand in the world, we have an important role in shaping healthy narratives around masculinity. And we try not to reinforce dated stereotypes. And we also, but we're not a brand that judges or tells people what to do. We just try to encourage people to be who they are. And obviously we always portray on Axe the everyday guy. And then when it comes to attraction, through the work that I mentioned that we did, you know, we don't want women to be the butt of our jokes. And, you know, that's been a big shift on the brand as we've evolved. And we don't want to overly sexualize them. So we show women with agency, and we love women ultimately. And that's really important that we show a very different type of attraction. And then in terms of pressure, right, young kids have got so much pressure. It's humor for us, right? At the end of the day, I think they say humor is one of the best medicines. And it is. We should all learn to, and as a brand, we have to take ourselves less seriously, and we try to encourage young people to release that stress and also, you know, what's the worst that can happen? Go for it.
Great. Okay, so back to you, Kian. So tell us something about what we're seeing in the differences between how boys and girls, or young Gen Z male and females, are being kind of polarized. I mean, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but the differences are emerging through social media. And what are the implications for brands? You know, brands like Axe, for example.
Firstly, I thought we might start a water fight, so that might be afterwards.
So I'm being a bit Gen Z then.
I think where you can see it, and it's really clear in behavior, is actually in voting patterns. Like we're seeing it not just in the UK, but globally. You're beginning to see the global gender divide when it comes to ideology. So in general, young men are voting more conservative. They're voting more right-wing. Young women are voting left and more progressive. So you saw this in the US election, where more young men voted for Trump. More young women voted for the Democrats. You saw this in Germany with the far-right AfD party. They got 25% of young men's votes, which was kind of historically unheard of. And you also saw it with South Korea, where young women voted in a liberal president. So I think it's easy to dismiss political ideology, but I would say ideology shapes every aspect of human society, including how people view brands and advertising. But I think more importantly, and the work we try to do at The People, is understand why is this happening. And I think the most important thing to acknowledge here is the progress women have made. Like, despite the systemic barriers, women are outperforming men in higher education and out earning them in the UK and a lot of cities in America. But the challenge with that for young men is some of them feel lost and confused about their place in modern society. And then the other thing we're seeing, which is connected to the social media point, is actually increasingly young men and women aren't occupying the same spaces virtually either. So they're being served different content. And the implications of that is if you're seeing different content, you have a divergence in personal taste, you have different cultural references, different language. So if you've got two different realities, it's very hard to see a shared vision of the future. And I think the opportunity for brands there is how do you bring young men and women together to form shared experiences? And Caroline, you talked about it. How do you also showcase more positive portrayals of men, young men, and masculinity in a way that otherwise that void is filled by others? And then lastly, I think it's important to mention brands have a responsibility in terms of where they invest in media, because they can choose either to invest in media that segregates young people and society, or that brings people together and unifies them.
Wow, I mean, it is quite a dystopian picture, isn't it? This idea that young boys and young girls are living in different virtual spaces. And, you know, the political, you know, you can argue there's a political implication of that in the way that young people are voting, for example. So, Caroline, coming back to Lynx, you know, what's your take as a marketer on helping young men build confidence in a positive way, especially in this era of kind of filters, followers, and very fragile self-image?
Yeah, so I think it comes back a little bit to what I was saying before, which is that, you know, for us, because humor is at our core, we really see that humor is the way that we help shape it in a positive manner. It's like, for us, it's about taking ourselves less seriously, but also for young people, it's about trying to make it lighter, trying to release some of the pressure that they feel. And then more increasingly, as Kian was saying, it's about how do we bring guys and girls together. So increasingly, we work with female creators. We also do quite a lot of things in real life to bring young people together, but very much keeping it light, keeping the humor there.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is that you're, as a brand, you're aware of it, and you see your role as kind of lightening the load on young men who live in a kind of, according to Kian, quite a narrow virtual world, as it were. So I'm getting the wrap up here from my friends at MadFest. So why don't we play a little bit of Axe content?
Yeah,
Caroline? So
we thought it'd be nice to just end with playing. This is a recent piece of work that I'm sure some of you, or I hope some of you will have seen, and it really just showcases the shift that we've made on the brand with all the things we've just talked about of masculinity, women with agency, and most importantly, humor. So I hope you get a little bit of lightness from it.
Put the money in the bag! I said, put the money in the bag, bitch! Shut up. Get on the floor. Let's do this! Come on! You've got this! Do it! Right, everyone go on the floor now!
Today, the robber came into the store and she wanted the old money.
Hurry up and give me the money!
Can I please stand up?
Yeah, get up! Hurry up!
The manager get all the money out of the till.
Put your hands up now!
My suit! Sorry, sir. I'll bring you a new plate after the robbery.
Shut up! Yeah, shut up, you fool!
She started sniffing me.
Jesus.
No, my name is Ryan.
That smell?
It's probably the soft shell crab.
You smell proper good.
And then the cops came and she just lay down on top of me.
hello, what's going on?
Thief went that way.
I love you.
I wanted to show you more, but I wasn't allowed.
You were edited up.
He kept me under a tight...
I've lost the questions off here.
Oh, what a shame. We could have played another act.
So Kian and Caroline thought they could leave the stage, but you've asked some very interesting questions, so I'm just going to... Sorry about that. So just quick, I'll be quick, okay? So the first question for you, really, I think, Caroline, is and this is from Eve Halmshaw, with the topic of focusing on toxicity of social media. Do you feel there is something brands can do to help break out of this toxicity bubble?
Yeah, I think, as I think I said on one of your questions before, I think brands do play an important role. And at Unilever, across all the brands, we take that very seriously. So for us, it's about not reinforcing dated stereotypes. And really for us, it's there. It's about ensuring that we're relevant, but we're not reinforcing dating stereotypes, and we're helping to open up different viewpoints around masculinity.
And we've got one other question, and we are getting wrapped up here. So this is for you, Kian. Why do you think young men are feeling lost about their place in society? Is it a factor of women's rights and more focus on equality? Bringing women up is bringing women down?
I think there is an element of that if you're struggling, that kind of zero-sum game. But I do want to end with like a bit of positivity. I think part of the challenge is like in the kind of with the decline of manufacturing, like a lot of men don't know what their role is in society, but also the data shows more young men are single than ever before. So I think those two dimensions of historically men have been the breadwinners, but also they've had a partner. When those two things are no longer in reach, it can create discontent. But there's also an opportunity, like you've been mentioning, to bring young men back into society in an inclusive way that's not toxic.
Great, thanks a lot, Kian. Look, I think we could discuss this topic all day, and I think that's been a really interesting discussion. Many thanks to Caroline and Kian. Please give them a big round of applause. And I hope you all feel as positive about Axe and Lynx as I do after that conversation. Thank you very much indeed.